Welcome back. Today's story filled with drama and unexpected turns. Hit like, subscribe, and let's jump in.
I'm Sean Matthew Jackson. I'm 29 and used to be an accounting consultant, fixing problems for one of the biggest independent oil companies in West Arizona. My main job was in El Paso, but I traveled a lot, sometimes around the US and even overseas, for my boss. He hired me right after college, and I ended up doing all sorts of tasks for him and his company. After finishing high school, I had to start working full-time to help support my family. My family consists of Mom, Grace, and my sister Ava and me. My mom is a single mother and has raised us by herself. My drunken a-hole of a father left us 3 weeks after Ava was born. I was 6 at the time. We never heard from him again. Mom always managed to clothe and feed us and give us a decent place to live, but there was never any extra money. I started working part-time when I was 14 and haven't stopped working since. Well, right now, I'm not working, but we'll get to that later. At 7 feet 3 inches and around 180 pounds, I was big for my age at 16. If I kept my voice low, I could pass for 22. That's how I got my first job in the oil fields. I think Darren, my first boss, knew that I wasn't 22, but I told him about my family, and he hired me anyway. He wouldn't let me work on the floor of the rig, but there was plenty to keep me busy doing other things. I did basically most of the grunt work necessary around a drilling rig. I would roll drill pipe into position to be picked up, tote the bags of drilling mud to the mixer, make sure there was water in the catch basins for drilling, and anything else that needed to be done. I worked part-time on the evening shift from 7 p.m. until 10 p.m., so I could go to school during the day. When I finished school, I went to work as a full-time roughneck on the floor of the rig. I had grown to 7'3" and added about 40 pounds by this time, so I had the size to work on the rig. After 3 years as a roughneck, a friend of my mother's, Victor, decided that I needed to become a driller. It paid more and wasn't as hard on your body as being a roughneck. You could only work so many years as a roughneck before the back-breaking labor beat you down. Victor was about 50 and had been a driller for 26 years. His face was seamed and lined from his years out in the weather, and his hands showed the abuse given them for the last 26 years. He walked stooped over and with a limp from an accident on a rig about 15 years ago. He looked like he had been rode hard and then rode hard some more. I was working the day shift and would stay over to learn from Victor. After almost a year working with and under Victor, I got my first job as a driller. The hardest part about being a driller, once you know the technical aspects, is controlling your crew. Roughnecks are an independent group and have to respect you before they will work hard for you. My first time out as a driller, I had an older crew. I was the youngest at 21. Being a new driller, I had to work the night shift from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. There was one old boy on the crew that wasn't going to put up with a young punk as his boss. Sean was 28 and a veteran roughneck. The first time he challenged me, I told him to get to work or get off the rig. Words and threats were exchanged, and the rest of the crew had to pull us apart. I gave as good as I got, but if it had gone on much longer, I would have gotten my butt kicked. The tool chaser, who was the overall boss on an oil rig, sent Sean home and docked his pay for fighting. Normally, fighting on a rig will get you fired, but if he fired Sean, he would have had to let me go too. Drillers for the night shift were hard to come by, so no one got fired. The next night, I was waiting for Sean before the shift began. As he got out of his truck, I told him we had unfinished business and needed to get it taken care of before we started our shift. We went behind the tool trailer to have our discussion. Our talk wasn't on the rig itself, so the headman had no say-so about what went on. Sean knocked me down 3 times, but I got up and started for him again. He held up his hands and said, "I've had enough. I'm afraid I'll break my hands on your face and won't be able to work you. And Daniel, let's go to work." I had earned the crew's respect for standing up to Sean and never had any more trouble from them. I guess the word spread because I never had a problem with any other crew. Months later, when Sean would find out I was drilling a well somewhere, he would come to work for me. We actually became friends and would share a few drinks together. 2 years as a driller made me realize that there had to be something more to life than oil rigs. The West Arizona weather baked you in the summer and froze you in the winter. Add in all the thunderstorms, rain, and lightning strikes, and the weather was not your friend. People always say that the Kansas plains are flat, but they are hilly compared to West Arizona. Oil is often found around a salt dome, and a salt dome 3 feet high stood out like a high hill on those West Arizona plains. The storms and winds would roll for miles with no hills or vegetation to slow them down. In addition, you had the dangerous job of working on an oil rig, and you can understand what a tough life this was. In addition, the rattlesnakes, scorpions, and spiders meant that the rig was not a good place to spend your career, at least not for me. I wanted to work smarter, not harder. I didn't want to end up like Victor in another 26 or 29 years, bent and broken, with hands that were gnarled and full of arthritis. One more detriment to working on a rig: once you started drilling, there were no days off. You worked 7 days a week in and week out, until the well was finished. I took jobs that let me work the night shift from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. so I could go to college during the day. My schedule was set up so that my last class was over at 1 p.m., which gave me time to get home, eat, study, and get some sleep before I started on the rig at 10. I didn't take off summers from school, so I graduated in 3 years with dual degrees, one in accounting and business management and one in computer science. The day after graduation, I began to look for a position where I could use my new degrees to get off the oil rigs. Along came Nathan Lee Carter and the Harrison Energy Company. Yeah, that was his real name. A lot of the old boys in Arizona had 2 first names that they were called by: Joe Bob, Billy Bob, Bobby Ray, etc., etc. I guess it's because everything is bigger in Arizona, and one name isn't big enough. Nathan had an ad in the local paper wanting to hire a full-charge accountant/bookkeeper, so I put in for the job. He called me, and we met at his office on a Friday at 3 p.m. This would give me time to get some sleep after the meeting so I could go back to the rig that evening. I hadn't quit my job as a driller and wouldn't until I got something else to move on to. I gave him a resume I had typed up, and we discussed my qualifications for about 29 minutes. Then we discussed my rig experience and the oil business for another hour. He asked, "Why do you want to quit working on the rigs? Drillers make pretty good money." "Yeah, they do, but it's hard on the body. Someday, I hope to have a family, and I want to be able to play with my kids and maybe grandkids," I explained. Nathan knew Victor and still hired him as a driller once in a while. He told me, "Let me think on this for a day or two, and I'll call you and let you know." I thanked him for his time and went home to get some rest before starting my shift on the rig. It was an interesting meeting, and I enjoyed talking to Nathan, but I really didn't think I would get the job. His secretary, Emily, told me that I was the youngest person to apply, and she seemed surprised that a big, strapping roughneck like me would apply for this job. 10 days later, I got a call from Harrison Energy wanting me to meet with Nathan again. This time, it was a Monday morning around 9 a.m. As I walked into the office, Emily handed me a cup of coffee and led me into Nathan's office. He was on the phone and pointed for me to take a chair. After he got off the phone, he smiled at me. "I'm offering you the job as accountant if you still want it, Sean. Here's the salary I'm willing to start you at," he said, sliding a folder with a piece of paper across his desk to me. I was surprised at the job offer. I actually thought he was going to offer me a job as a driller on a new well that we had talked about in our previous meeting. The written offer was about 10% more than I was making as a driller, and I didn't have to work on a rig anymore. "Sounds good, Mr. Carter. I accept the job, and thanks," I responded. "How soon can you start?" "Probably in 10 days or so, sir. I have to finish drilling this well, and then I'm free." "Couldn't they get someone else to work in your place?" Nathan said, looking at me in an appraising way. "Yeah, I guess they could, but it would slow them down until they found someone. Besides, I gave them my word when I took the driller's job that I would finish the well. I don't like to go back on my word, Mr. Carter. I need you to start by midweek, or I'll have to find someone else," Nathan said, dashing my hopes for a way out of the oil fields with that statement. Hesitating for a few seconds, I stood up to leave. "Thanks for the offer, Mr. Carter, but I guess you better find someone else." I gave them my word, and I aim to keep it. "Thanks again for the offer. Call me if you need a driller for that new well. See you sometime." Nathan started laughing. "Sit down, boy, you've got the job. I just wanted to see if you were a man of your word, and you've proven you are. You're the kind of man I want working for me. Go finish your well, and then come to the office, and we'll put you to work." Saying that, he picked up the phone and started making a call. I left his office, and I don't think my feet touched the ground all the way out to my truck. First time out, and I found a way to get off that damn oil rig. I was stoked and could hardly wait to start with Harrison Energy Company. As I got back to my place, my cell phone started ringing, and when I answered it, it was my current boss. He offered me a job on the day shift at his next well with an increase in pay. He said that the way I handled Sean and got the respect of that crew told him that I could run any crew. I can't, Mr. Williams. I'm starting a new job right after I get this well to depth, I told him. I was just coming into my own as a driller and was beginning to be offered really good rigs and wells, but I wanted out of the oil fields. He asked, and I told him where I was going to work and why. Well, Nathan Carter is a good man, and I can understand you wanting to better yourself. Good luck to you, Sean. If you decide to come back to drilling, give me a first call, will you? We had to change a drill bit that night, and it put us a little behind. To change the bit, we had to pull out over 9,500 feet of drill pipe, replace the bit, and put the same amount of pipe back into the drill hole. So it was 12 days before I could report to Harrison Energy. The well came in on the day shift, but I worked my shift helping to dismantle the derrick and rig so it could be moved to the next site. I finished my shift at 7 a.m., went home, got a bite to eat, cleaned up, and reported to Nathan's office at 8 a.m. He had heard that the well made depth the night before and grinned at me when I walked in. Go home, get a day's rest, and be back tomorrow morning at 9. I want you bright-eyed and bushy-tailed when you start work for me, Nathan told me. The next morning, I made my first step out of working in the oil fields. I found that I had 3 clerks and another accountant working for me. Around noon, Nathan took me to lunch and explained some things to me. First thing, my name is Nathan Lee. Mr. Carter is my daddy. Next, I had several people to choose from for this job, most with more experience than you. Do you know why I hired you instead of any of the others? By now, I had a rapport with Nathan and answered, I guess because I'm so good-looking and you wanted to improve the decor around the office. He laughed, nearly falling out of his chair. Yeah, that's one of the reasons, but the real reason I hired you is because you know the oil business from the field side. You've worked on rigs and know what it takes to bring in a well. It's not just numbers, and you know that. I can trust you to look at the numbers and reports and know if the well is worth the expenditure or should we cap it and move on. You will know if a tool chaser or driller is trying to blow smoke up my butt or if they are reporting truthfully. It was your field experience on the rigs that made the difference. Nathan told me that I would be more than an accountant. He wanted me to be a troubleshooter and field expert. He wanted me to meet with the geologists, the drillers, and the crews. I was to hire the best roughnecks, drillers, and tool chasers for his wells, pay them above the going rate, and keep them fat and happy, but make sure they produced. I was to be his jack of all trades and do what I thought best to keep the bottom line in the black. 6 months in, my job at Harrison Energy was going well. Nathan gave me a raise, which enabled me to send more money home to my mom and sister. I had saved the company a lot of money by being able to read the phony reports one crew was sending in and correcting that problem. Sean and his crew had just finished another well, so I fired that crew and hired Sean. Those guys were able to bring the well in under budget. I got a raise, Sean and his boys got a big bonus, and Harrison Energy made money. It was a win-win situation. I had more time to socialize now with a daytime job and started to hang out on the weekends at a couple of the roadhouses in the area. Now that I had an office-type job, I could dress better, no more dirty jeans, steel-toed work boots, and t-shirts. I wore slacks or dress jeans, nice shirts, and cowboy boots. I looked pretty spiffy, if I do say so myself. Then I made a mistake. I fell in lust. Lyla was a tall, little filly that caught my eye at the ranch, a Phoenix dance hall. She was about 5 feet 9 inches, so she fit my large frame very well, as I found out when I danced with her. She had Arizona strawberry blonde hair worn long down her back and big brown eyes. One look, and I was in lust, if not in love. We hit it off from our first meeting and quickly became an item. She was always happy and willing to party till all hours. Lyla lived off a small trust fund from her grandparents and didn't have to work, so she had lots of time to recover from her party nights. By the way, it's not only the men of Arizona that have 2 names. A lot of the women did too, Sue and Billy Sue, Bobby Joe, etc. We dated off and on for about a year, and I thought I was in love. I say off and on because we had a few bumps in the road during our relationship. I had to travel once about every 4 or 5 weeks because of my job. I would visit drilling rigs, trying to solve problems or just get a feel for a while. My trips usually lasted 3 or 4 days at the most. Even though I was gone, it didn't stop Lyla from going to the ranch or other dance halls. I wasn't real happy about that, but I didn't make an issue of it until the night I found her cuddled up with some cowboy in one of the booths at the ranch. Old cliché. I got done with my trip early and thought I would surprise her. When she wasn't at her place, I knew she was probably gone out dancing. If I found her at one of the honky-tonks, I was going to be a little upset. Just before I left on this current trip, we had a serious discussion about her going out when I was gone. She certainly was surprised when I walked up to the booth where she and her cowboy were snuggling. The young man and she were sharing a hug, and his hand was high up at the side of her breast. She had her eyes closed, and she opened them as I slid into the booth across from them. "Oh my God," she said. The guy looked to be about 24, like Lyla, and she pushed the man away and said to me, "Hi, honey. I thought you were still on your business trip. Why do people say such stupid things when they screw up and get caught? It's obvious that you thought I was still gone, or you wouldn't be here with Cowboy Boy, would you?" He sort of bristled at that. "Oh no, I'm not here with Evan. He and my cousin Julie are dating, and I just ran into him. You could have fooled me. I thought from that hug that you two were together for the evening. Honey, he came over to say hello, and it was just a hug among friends. Evan, this is my boyfriend, Sean. Sean, this is Evan." Evan reached to shake hands, even though he seemed a little nervous. I took his hand and gave him a very, very firm handshake. His hand was soft and not used to hard work. He apparently wasn't a real cowboy. If he threw a rope with those hands, the skin would have been ripped off. Evan was a drugstore cowboy and had probably never seen a ranch in his life. He gave a little moan from the pain of my firm handshake, and I let him go. Does a friendly hug include Evan here feeling your chest? If I had come in a few minutes earlier, would I have seen a friendly little kiss? I asked. And by the way, Evan, that's ex-boyfriend, I added. No, Sean, I tell you, nothing was going on. We danced a few times, that's all. I thought you said he just came over to say hello, and now you tell me you two were dancing. Which is it? I was born at night, Lyla, but it wasn't last night. I know exactly what's going on here. Lyla and I had been dating for about 3 months when I gave her the only thing I had ever gotten from my dad. It was a gold nugget necklace that he had won in a poker game before he left. He asked me several times to give it back to him. I guess he wanted to sell it to B-Boss. Even at 7, I wasn't stupid, so I told him I had lost it. That got me a backhand across the face, but at least I still had the nugget. That necklace was sort of like a pre-engagement ring for Lyla, and she was leaning across the table, trying to take my hand. I reached over and pulled the necklace off her. If she wanted to play around, I wasn't going to let her do so with my brand on her. When I grabbed it, she was shocked, and Cowboy Evan decided to get involved. He grabbed my arm to stop me. "Son, you really don't want to buy into this. She's not worth going to the hospital for," he warned. I threatened him. I guess the memory of the firm handshake and the look in my eyes made a believer out of him. He let go of my arm and sat back down. "I'm sure you can get a ride home, Lyla, and I won't wait for you. Then adios, kids." About 3 blocks from the bar, my cell phone started going off. I could see that it was Lyla, and I thought about ignoring it but decided to get this over with. "Hello, Lyla. What do you want?" "Honey, come back and get me so we can talk. I came with Donna, and she hooked up with some guy and left me. I don't have a ride." "Talking's over with, girl. You were going to ride Evan tonight. Just have him take you home first. Don't call me again, we're done." Lyla, of course, called again, and being young and stupid, I gave her another chance. I didn't really believe all the crap she tried to feed me about that night, but I loved her and didn't really want to break up with her. That was the first time. The same thing happened when I took another trip about 6 months later. I didn't catch her with anyone, but friends told me she had been out dancing each of the 4 nights I was gone. There's an old adage that says, Those that don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it, and that's what happened to me. Of course, hindsight is perfect, and I should have shut her down after the first incident with Evan or Bobby Joe or whatever the hell his name was. I didn't learn from history, and I would repeat it. After the last time we fought about her going out, she said, if we were married, I wouldn't have to go out. We would have a home, and I would wait for you there. That was either unassailable logic or manipulation, but it worked. We got engaged and then quickly married. Our wedding was small, but the reception was large and held at the ranch, of all places, because that was where we met. We went to Tucson for our honeymoon and stayed in a hotel right on the Riverwalk. Never did see much of the Riverwalk, though. We were too busy exploring each other. Neither of us were virgins, but we needed to see how we fit together and what we each liked. A good time was had by all. I went back to work and was lucky there was no traveling necessary for a couple of months. Then I had to make a trip to Nevada for 6 days and nights. When I got back home, Lyla tried to make up for lost time. My first night back, the next morning at breakfast, I asked her what she had done while I was gone. I wasn't happy to hear that she had gone out dancing 3 of the 6 nights I was gone, starting with the first night I was gone. This led to our first spat. Hell, it was a fight as a married couple. She still didn't understand why I didn't want her out dancing with other men while I was gone. You never minded me dancing when we go out together. You even let me dance with other guys. Why is it a problem if I go when you're gone? She argued. Remember the times before we got married and the problems your dancing caused when I wasn't with you? You're a married woman now and shouldn't be out dancing without your husband. When I'm with you, I can protect you and support you. I don't want you going out dancing by yourself when I'm gone. That seemed to put an end to her nights out when I was gone for the next 22 months. My business trips were few and far between. Most, but not all, of the trips I had to make Lyla was able to go with me. We treated them like a mini vacation or a mini honeymoon. Things were good. Our second anniversary rolled around, and of course, the gremlins decided that things were going too smoothly for me. I had to go to Colorado for 6 days, which put our celebration plans off until I could get home. Lyla was not happy she couldn't go on this trip because I would be way out in the boonies, in an oil camp in the middle of the jungle, with no town or other women for 50 miles. Lyla didn't or wouldn't understand that I couldn't tell my boss that I wouldn't go. She had never worked a day in her life and didn't understand the responsibilities of a job. This was only our second real argument, but it was a big one. We both calmed down and spent our last few nights before my trip trying to love each other to death. She told me she decided to go visit her parents, who were camping in their RV at Comanche Lake near Big Springs, Arizona, while I was gone. Lyla said she would call me because she didn't want her phone ringing to disrupt her father's fishing. She did call me the first night I was there to make sure I got there safely. The call was mostly about how much we missed each other and couldn't wait for me to come home. She called every day that I was gone, the key being the daytime calls. When I did get home, we were all over each other. She told me that she had spent the time I was gone with her parents at the lake. Our life got back to normal, and I took Lyla dancing every weekend. I would have preferred to stay home once in a while, but she had quit going out by herself, so I thought, fair is fair. Let her enjoy herself. We would go to one of the dance halls around Phoenix, and Lyla would never miss a dance all evening. If I got tired, she would dance with her girlfriends and once in a while with a guy that we both knew. She even danced with my old crewmate Victor a few times. If a stranger asked her to dance, she would refuse, telling them she was a married woman. Her answer made me feel good, secure, and safe. Sure, I was safe and secure, and then up jumped the devil to screw up my life. I ran into Sean outside our office one morning about 2 months after I got back from Colorado. He had been in to see Nathan about a job on a new well that was starting in a month. We walked over to his truck to share a couple of beers and talk for a few minutes. He seemed nervous and started to say something a couple of times, but would stop and then go on about something else. Finally, I told him to spit it out. I've got something to tell you, and you're not going to like it. Just don't shoot the messenger, okay? I nodded for him to go on. I know you don't like Lyla going out to the clubs without you, but when you were in Colorado, she was at the ranch every night, and I saw her, he said. He tried to continue, but I hit him. He fell back against his truck, and I yelled at him, "You're a lying piece of garbage. I started for him again, but Sean wrapped both his arms around me and held me so that I couldn't move. We're not going there again, Sean. I'm not lying. Others saw her too. I didn't have the guts to tell you before, but it kept eating at me, and I thought you should know. I calmed down and apologized for hitting him. It was hard to believe that Lyla would go out like that when she knew how I felt about it, and she had agreed not to do it anymore after our last talk about it. That's not the worst of it, buddy, Sean continued. 3 different nights, she went outside with a guy and was gone for about 45 minutes. Now I was really mad. Not only was she going out alone where no married woman should be, but going outside with a man did not look good. Maybe they were just getting some fresh air, but not for 45 minutes. Her actions would not pass the husband test. Different guy each time, Sean said. I didn't want to believe that she was doing anything more than getting some fresh air, so I followed her on one of the nights. Lyla and this guy got into the back seat of a Cadillac. I didn't go over to see exactly what they were doing, but I could see her legs up in the air, and she handed him her panties when they got out of the car. Now, I was certain. I used my phone and took pictures of them getting in and out of that car, of her legs up in the air and her handing him her panties. Sean hesitated a little, then showed me the pictures. I stood there with my head down and my hands on my knees, trying hard not to throw up. Sean helped me sit down on the tailgate of his truck and handed me a bottle of Jack Daniels. A couple of hits on the bottle, and I was able to get control of myself. Now, what to do? I thought if Sean was right, Lyla and I were done. What are you going to do? Sean asked as he offered me the bottle again. I refused the whiskey. My dad was a drunk, and I didn't intend to let this turn me into one. I don't know just yet, but I'll do something. You can damn well believe it, I answered. Sean and I went into my office, and I downloaded the pictures from his phone to my computer. Do you know any of these guys she was with? I think I'd like to have a little talk with them, one at a time. First, I said. I don't know them. I think they're just Saturday night cowboys that hang around the ranch. Second, Sean, stop and think. You know none of them would have been with her without an invitation. This is all on her. And even though you would feel good if you kicked their butts, if you go to jail because of this, she wins. Sean advised me that night. When I got home, I told Lyla I must have eaten some bad tacos or something and went to bed early. I wasn't sure I could control my anger and pretended to be asleep when she came to bed. The next morning, I left before she woke up and went to talk to Nathan. He was not only my boss but my good friend. I explained what was going on and what I wanted to do. Are you sure this is what you want, Sean? Don't you want to talk to Lyla first? No need for any more talk. I've got witnesses and photos, and what could she possibly have to say that would explain what she did? I answered. It was a rhetorical question, and I really didn't expect an answer. Will you help me, Nathan? I asked. Nathan picked up his phone and called the company's lawyer. After telling him what he wanted, Nathan listened for a minute and said, I don't care if you have to break an arm, get it done. Bring the papers to me before end of business today. Before I left the office, I had printed out the pictures and had the divorce papers for Lyla's signature. It's amazing how fast legal things can get done when you know the right people. Nathan knew the right people. Lyla was surprised when I came home early. I know it's a cliché, but I told her I had to go to Nevada and would be gone for 2 nights. She helped me pack a bag and asked if I had time for a quickie before I had to leave. Shaking my head no, I left. She seemed a little upset when I didn't hug or kiss her before I left. Later, I thought I should have, so she wouldn't be suspicious. I spent the rest of the day at one of the rigs talking to Victor. Around 8 p.m., I went home, and as expected, Lyla wasn't there. I made myself comfortable in my chair with a cooler full of beer and waited for my precious bride to come home. It was getting on to 1 a.m., but I was only on my 4th beer when Lyla came through the front door. She was alone, which was a good thing. I don't think I could have held myself back if she had brought a boy toy home with her. Lyla locked the door and went into the kitchen. She turned on the light and got a beer. As she turned around, she saw the pictures that I had spread out on the table. Her hair was messed up, and her clothes looked wrinkled. Oh God, no, she said. She looked around and saw me standing in the doorway and slumped down into a chair. Honey, it's not what it looks like, she started. I held up my hand to stop her. It's exactly what it looks like, Lyla. That's my wife at a dance hall when she was supposed to be with her parents. That's my wife getting into the backseat of a car with someone other than her husband. That's my wife with her legs waving in the air. That's my wife giving her panties to some guy, again, not her husband. Did I miss anything? Did I leave anything out? As I talked, I could feel the rage and hurt building up in me. I threw my beer bottle against the wall above the sink, and it exploded, spraying the kitchen with beer and glass. Lyla flinched and said, "You were gone, and I was lonely, and it just sort of happened." I'm sorry. I couldn't believe she was going to use that tired old line, that it just happened because I was gone. That dog won't hunt, girl. I was gone for one night before you started your little romances. One night, not a month or even a week, but one night. I paused, taking a deep breath to control myself. Yes, I said romances. Plural. I know about at least 2 other guys too. What I don't know is how many others there have been. Did the other 2 just sort of happen? The anger was fighting with my self-control, and I knew I had to get away from her. I went into the bedroom, carried my 2 suitcases out to my truck. I had packed them while I was waiting for her to come home. Where are you going? Please stay and talk. We can get past this. It didn't mean anything, she pleaded. You didn't even wait 12 hours after I left today before you went out to party. How lonely could you get in 12 hours when I told you I was going? You were already planning your little fling. No, that's not the way it was, she replied. I went for a drive and ended up at the ranch. I didn't plan it, and I didn't do anything wrong. I swear, she told me. It's a damn shame. She sure is a pretty thing. I thought we had it good for a while. I'll believe that if you can do one thing for me, Lyla. If you can show me that one thing and prove what you said, I will unpack, stay, and work this out. What thing? She asked. Show me that you're still wearing your panties, or did you give them to the guy that you were with tonight? The way she slumped further down onto the chair and put her face in her hands answered the question for me. I threw the divorce papers in front of her and told her to sign them and get them back to my lawyer. I've been fair. We'll split what's in the savings and checking accounts, and you can have the furniture and your car. The house is rented, so that's not a problem. You can stay or go. It really didn't matter, because I'm gone. I suggest you sign them. You won't do so good if you contest the divorce. You know how the courts are here. Women who commit adultery do not fare well in the divorce courts of Arizona. It's still a good old boy network state, and a cheating wife is treated about the same as a horse thief. Maybe that's not fair or politically correct, but that's the way it is. And that's okay too. I moved in with Sean for a while, and the first week away from Lyla was the hardest. The anger and hurt were still strong, but I missed her too. She called me every 2 or 3 hours on my cell and 3 or 4 times a day at the office. The first time she called my cell and at the office, I told her to leave me alone and sign the papers. I refused to take her calls at the office after that and turned off my cell. A new cell phone solved the problem of Marcus having to contact me when he or I were out of the office. The separation entered its 2nd week, and Lyla started to wait for me in front of the company building. Emily would clue me in which door she was at, and I would duck out the other one. Cowardly, I know, but I wasn't sure I could control myself and didn't want to take the chance that I might smack the hell out of her. Finally, things reached a breaking point, and I told Marcus I was going to make a run to some of our wells in northern Arizona and Nevada. The trip should take about 2 weeks, and maybe Lyla would understand that we were not going to work through this problem. When I came back from the business trip, Emily had a letter for me from Lyla. I started to throw it into the trash, but Emily suggested, hell, ordered me to read it. You didn't mess with Emily. She was a force of nature. In the letter, Lyla promised that if I would give her 29 minutes to talk to me, she would sign the divorce papers if I still wanted her to. I called Lyla and set up a time to meet at my lawyer's office. I would give her 29 minutes and have this all over with. I thought Friday afternoon at 1 p.m. I walked into the lawyer's office, and Lyla was sitting in the conference room. The divorce papers were on the table in front of her. My attorney sat in both to run the meeting and as a witness. I slid the document across the table to Lyla. Sign the paper, Lyla, I said. But you said you would give me 29 minutes, she said pleadingly. I don't trust you. I could give you the time to talk, and you could refuse to sign, and we would be right back to square one, I answered. I promise you, honey, talk to me, and then I will sign if you still want me to. Lyla replied, yeah, you promised, but you promised that there would be no one but me when we got married too. You promised that you would quit going out dancing when I was gone, and you see how that went. Sign the damn papers, and I'll promise to talk. If I change my mind, we can tear up the papers. She signed the papers, and I had the lawyer witness and notarize it. Then he left us alone to have our talk. You wanted to talk, so go ahead. The clock is ticking, I said, looking at my watch. Lyla spent the next 15 minutes telling me that she was sorry. She said she was mad at me for going to Colorado on our anniversary and went to the ranch to spite me. She continued saying she had too much to drink, and going out to that guy's car just sort of happened. Then I got the line about how it didn't mean anything, that it was only sex, and I was the only one that she loved. There was a lot more of the typical, but I let her talk and didn't interrupt her. Finally, she wound down and stopped talking. Are you finished? Have you said everything you wanted to say to me? I asked. She nodded her head. Okay. Now I have a few things to say to you. Before we got married, did Evan playing with you in that booth just happen to? Your past history at those dance halls doesn't help me believe you. While I was in Colorado, you went outside with at least 2 other guys. I have witnesses. Did they just happen to? I was speaking in a normal voice, not yelling or shouting. My mama always told me that if you yelled at someone, they would get defensive or start yelling back. They would start thinking about how to defend themselves instead of paying attention to what you were saying. If your little escapade in the backseat of the Cadillac just happened, what about the other 2 guys? If you felt guilty about what you did, why did you go back the very next night and every other night that I was gone? And you know the real kicker here, the real tragedy, Lyla. She was sitting across from me with tears running down her cheeks. She shook her head no to answer my question. You've destroyed everything that I care about with your little, it just happened. You've destroyed our marriage. I might be able to forgive you, but I won't ever forget. If we got back together, every time you didn't answer the phone when I called, or you took too long to go to the store or beauty shop, I would wonder if you were meeting someone. Every time I would leave on a trip, I would wonder if you would decide that it would be okay to go to a dance hall. I had to stop for a few seconds to get my control back, remembering what Mama told me. You've destroyed my career and my home. I can't stay in Phoenix because everywhere I go, it reminds me of you. All the restaurants, the movie house, and even the dance halls would remind me of you, so I have to leave. But the worst thing you did was you destroyed any chance I would ever have of loving someone else. I'm dead inside. I can't let anyone get that close to me again because of what you did to me. I'm afraid of being hurt again. By this time, Lyla was really crying but still listening to me. I stood and looked down at her, starting toward the door. I won't wish you good luck, but I do hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. Maybe there's a guy out there who's willing to go along with you going dancing and being a 304, but it's not me. Not by a long shot. Go to hell, Lyla. I walked out, leaving her sobbing at the table. Marcus had tried to talk me out of leaving but understood why I couldn't stay. He wished me luck, told me I could always come back, and gave me my last paycheck. He shook my hand and turned back to his office. I believe he had tears in his eyes too. Emily hugged me and kissed my cheek, telling me to let myself heal and then come back to them. She definitely had tears in her eyes. Having already said goodbye to Sean and Victor and packed my stuff in my truck, I stopped and spent a couple of hours with Mom and my sister before leaving. I left some money for her. They both knew what Lyla had done and didn't try to talk me out of leaving. As I hugged Mom goodbye, she said, if you run from trouble or problems, you can get away for a little while, but every time you look over your shoulder, there they are waiting for you. Go ease your mind for a little while, but you can't run away forever. She kissed me on the cheek and went back into the house. I promised to call or write them as I traveled around. Then, I pointed the nose of my truck west and started driving. I had decided to leave Phoenix and get out of the oil business. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do, but that last check Marcus gave me would keep me going for a few months. That check was for 3 months' salary and a sizable bonus, which gave me some breathing room. Because of Lyla, I found it hard to trust, not only myself but everyone around me. Because of Lyla, I was afraid. Back to where we started, I just turned 29 and am unemployed, looking for somewhere to light. Because of my last check from Harrison Energy, I had enough to keep me going for 4 or 5 months if I didn't spend like an oil sheik. I headed west with stops in Van Horn, Arizona, where I spent a couple of days. My next layover was in Albuquerque, New Colorado. After 8 or southwest hours on the road, I was ready for a good meal and a night's sleep. I wasn't in any hurry, so I spent a few days as a tourist. The Sandia Peak Tramway was a peaceful ride up the mountain and a great view of some beautiful country. I sampled the Tex-Mex menus at several cantinas and just relaxed for a while. I decided to go to Florida. I had never seen the ocean, and a little fun in the sun might just be the thing for this old boy from Arizona. When I got to the Atlantic, I was suitably impressed. Pictures and movies don't do it justice. I kicked around the beach for about 2 weeks, watching the waves mostly. I watched the beach bunnies in their tiny bikinis. I may be emotionally dead and didn't want to get close to anyone, but I sure did like looking at the lovelies on the beach and in the waterfront bars. While I was on the beach, Marcus called to tell me that the divorce was final. I was legally free. A lot of people don't realize that there are several oil fields in Florida: Signal Hill, Santa Fe, and Huntington Beach, just to name a few. In the early 1920s, Florida was the #1 oil-producing state in the country. I talked to a couple of people that Marcus had told me about and got a job with one of the companies. No, I was not a driller or a roughneck, but I did inspections and preventative maintenance on the already producing wells. I thought I better make some money instead of just depending on Marcus's last check. I worked and knocked around the Miami/Long Beach area for several months. Southern Florida is beautiful, has a great climate, and some of the most beautiful girls in the world. However, it's not Arizona. There's just something about Arizona that draws people home, even to the flat plains of the West Arizona oil fields. I decided that I had run away for long enough and needed to start for home. There was no timeline, but I was headed back to Phoenix. Leaving Miami, I headed east on I-40 to Flagstaff, Arizona, and then turned north to visit the Grand Canyon. It takes more than 1 day to see the canyon and appreciate it, so I spent 4 days there. I made sure to hike down into the canyon to Phantom Ranch, spent the night, and hiked back out the next day. It was a tough hike, but well worth the effort. I retraced my route back to Flagstaff and spent the night. The next morning, I headed back west. I drove to Laughlin, Nevada, which is on the Arizona-Nevada state line. Laughlin has several casinos and is like a mini Las Vegas. I knew this was backtracking a little, but Laughlin might be a good place to spend a few days. It was lively, loud, and full of people enjoying themselves. Maybe I could be like them instead of thinking about my ex-wife. I spent a couple of days exploring the different casinos, watching a few of the floor shows, and testing my luck and skills at Arizona Hold'em. My first boss, Darren, and the boys on that first rig must have taught me well. I won a small tournament that I entered. Aside from the cash prize, I won a seat in a much bigger tournament starting the next night. Not a small thing, that seat. The tournament had a $550 buy-in with a first-place prize of $11,000. I really didn't think I could win, but if I could make it to the last 20 players, I would finish in the money and get my entrance fee back. Plus, it took my mind off Lyla. Again, the lessons taught to me by Darren and the crew proved valuable. I didn't win, but I did place third and won $3,500. The casino wanted publicity pictures with the top 3 finishers, and the casino manager, I hit the jackpot again. The manager was a friend and former classmate, Ron Nichols. After the pictures, Ron invited me to have dinner with him in the VIP room. We had a good time catching up. Ron wanted to know what I had been doing. He asked if I had gotten off the oil rigs and what I was doing in Laughlin. I questioned him about the same things, ending with how he became the manager of the casino. You know, I took hotel management and business administration at school, and after a training and breaking-in period, the company sent me here to Laughlin, Ron explained. Now, what's your story, and don't leave anything out. I told Ron about my job with Harrison Energy, answering his question about getting off the oil rigs. I shared the rest of my sad story concerning Lyla, all over more Jack Daniels than I should have had. By the end of my story, I knew I was in northwest shape to drive, and Ron got me a room at the casino hotel. Ron did say he hoped Lyla rotted in hell, or something like that. It was good to have friends. The next day, we met for brunch and continued our old home week. "So, what are your plans now, Sean?" Ron asked after we finished breakfast. "I haven't thought past the tournament last night. Don't really know what I want to do now, but this traveling around is getting old in a hurry. It's fine to do on a vacation, but not as a lifestyle. Not for me, anyway." We talked for most of the afternoon, and after I had a chance to rest for a couple of hours, we went to dinner again in the VIP section. Ron arranged for a couple of lovely young ladies to join us, just for company, you understand. It was nice to look at some scenery that didn't have trees or mountains, but I wasn't interested or ready for anything more than a dinner companion. The ladies weren't professionals. They were a couple of Ron's playmates, and he was willing to share with me. Like I said, it's good to have friends. Ron and the ladies left me at the bar after dinner and went on their way. I had one more drink left, then left the bar and went to the VIP poker room. I didn't need to start looking at the world from the bottom of a bottle, even if it was a Jack Daniel's bottle. I watched the games for a few minutes and then sat in on a hold'em game with a $3,500 buy-in. I was playing with my winnings from the tournament, so the buy-in didn't dig into my bankroll from Marcus's check, which was money I had saved for my job in Florida. After about 2 hours, I decided to quit and cashed in my chips. I added another $8,000 to my bankroll. I went back to the bar to get one more drink before heading to bed. Sitting at the bar was Julie, one of the lovelies who had joined Ron and me at dinner. She smiled at me, and I accepted her offer of a glass of wine. We had a very pleasant 2 hours of conversation until we were the only ones left in the bar. She suggested that we get a bottle of wine and adjourn to her room to continue our talk. The next morning, I woke up next to her in bed. The little noise she was making was so delicate that I don't think you could say she was snoring. I can't say it enough, it's really good to have friends. After showering, I kissed her goodbye as she lay in bed. Julie told me she enjoyed our time together and invited me to come back. I was going to meet Ron for breakfast before I left, so I did. This wasn't a relationship, just two healthy young people enjoying each other, I thought to myself. Ron and I were eating when I told him about Julie. She's just what I needed to begin repairing my ego. "Very nice girl," I said. He just laughed and told me it was her idea to wait for me at the bar last night. "I think she liked you from the first moment." Ron paused for a moment and then asked, "Answer a question for me, will you?" I nodded, curious. "What the hell are you doing, Sean? The Daniel I knew would never run away like you did. The Daniel I knew would have stayed and rubbed Lila's nose in what she lost. If you let it all just follow you around, it'll just keep following you." I looked at Ron for a few seconds, then started to laugh. "You sound just like my mom," I said. When I stopped laughing, I added, "She told me the same thing. Your problems will stay on you until you turn and meet them head on." "I didn't know you were that smart, Ron." We both laughed as we finished breakfast. As I stood up, Ron asked, "So, what are you going to do now?" "I'm going to take a friend's advice and go rub Lila's nose in what she threw away. I'm going home and getting on with my life." "Thanks, Ron. If you're ever in Phoenix, give me a call. You're a good friend." Pointing the nose of my truck east, I started my drive back home. I would go to Marcus when I got home and see if my job was still available. After all, I had been gone for almost a year. If not, I could get a job as a roughneck or driller on one of the oil rigs and look for a chance to improve my life again. I could stay with Mom until I found my own place. Repeating history, I guess. Maybe so. But I was done running away. When I got to Phoenix, I went to Mom's place first, and she invited me to stay with her for as long as I needed to. The next morning, I was sitting on the hood of my truck in front of Harrison Energy when Marcus got there. I had already been inside to see Emily, and she promised not to call Marcus so I could surprise him. He was on his cell phone when he pulled up in his Cadillac and wasn't really paying attention. Marcus shut down his phone and climbed out of his car, taking about 3 steps before he saw me. He was so cool, there were no shouts of hello or grabbing my hand to shake it or even a smile. An outsider would have thought these two old boys had just seen each other a short time ago. As Marcus passed me on his way into the office, he said, care for a cup of coffee, Sean?" I nodded and followed him to his office. Emily already had the coffee on his desk. She smiled at me, sort of shook her head, and smiled at Marcus's reaction to my return. Emily patted me on the shoulder and closed the door as she left. For the first time, Marcus showed some emotion. "Damn, I'm glad you're back, son. The timing couldn't be better." "Well, I'm glad the timing of my return meets with your approval, Marcus," I told him. "I need to get you up to speed on what's going on with the company, because you're going to have to take over the whole shooting match in 4 weeks. You'll have to run it for about 3 weeks after that." There was my answer about my job still being open, no question that it was. "What do you mean, run the whole thing for 3 weeks? What are you going to be doing?" I asked, confused by his statement. Marcus smiled. "I can't very well take the business with me on my honeymoon now, can I?" I was even more puzzled. A honeymoon? If there was no wedding? Marcus laughed at my surprise. "Oh, did I forget to tell you that? Yeah, I'm going to marry Sophia Sulmer in a month and be gone for 3 weeks after that. Maybe longer, don't know for sure. Isn't she the widow who owns the cafe on Main Avenue? When did all this come about?" I asked, still trying to wrap my head around the situation. Marcus explained, "Yeah, that's her. Sophia and I had been dating sort of on the sly for about 7 months. She sold the cafe in her house, and was going to move to Tucson, but I wouldn't let her. I told her, you might as well marry me and stay here. You know you'll just be driving back and forth to see me anyway." He chuckled. I admit it wasn't the most romantic proposal, but it worked. "I rented your old apartment after Lyla moved out, and Sophia's kids can stay there while we're gone. They're old enough to look out for themselves." "Wait, how old are her kids, Marcus? How old is Sophia if her kids are old enough to take care of themselves? For that matter, how old are you?" I asked, still in disbelief. Marcus looked thoughtful before answering, "Let's see. Kelly is about 26, and Jeff just turned 20. He's going into the Air Force in 3 months, so he won't be around much longer. The kids can manage in that 2-bedroom apartment until Jeff leaves, and Kelly can stay there after that if she wants to. She broke it off with some guy in Austin after she caught him in bed with her roommate and decided to come back home. As for Sophia, I guess she's about 45 or so, and I'm of legal age and know what I'm doing," Marcus said with a laugh, making light of his age difference with Sophia. He then added, "Oh, by the way, I need a best man. You up for the job?" I blinked in surprise. Marcus had been married for 29 years to Molly, but she had passed away a couple of years ago from cancer. It was good to see him happy and involved in something other than Harrison Energy for a change. On my second day back at the office, Marcus brought Sophia around to introduce her to the guy who was making it possible for the lovebirds to take an extended honeymoon. She was friendly, funny, and intelligent, and it didn't hurt that she was a damn good-looking woman. She may have been 45, but she could have passed for 35 in broad daylight, and much younger by candlelight. We had just finished the pleasantries of, "Nice to meet you, how are you, good to finally meet you," and such when her daughter, Kelly, came into the office. "Daniel, this is my daughter, Kelly." "Kelly, this is Daniel, Marcus's right-hand man," Sophia introduced us. I was so stunned by Kelly's appearance that I don't think I made the best first impression. I just stood there and didn't say anything. I finally nodded at her and sat back down behind my desk. For a guy who was supposedly dead inside and had no interest in women, I sure was struck by Kelly. She looked like a younger version of her mother, but wearing boots and jeans. Long auburn hair, cornflower blue eyes, and tall, about 5 feet 10 inches. Of course, 2 inches of her height was the boot she wore. Kelly was athletically slender, not thin but toned to just this side of muscular. She, like her mother, was very friendly, funny, and intelligent. Kelly turned to her mother and said, "If we're done with the wedding plans for now, Jeff and I want to go out to the ranch and do some quail hunting tomorrow morning. Is that okay?" Sophia smiled, "Sure, go ahead, but be back by evening. I have that meeting with the preacher, and I want you there. You know how he riles me up sometimes, and with you there, I won't kick his butt out the door." She got a thoughtful look on her face, then smiled and said, "Why don't you take Daniel with you guys?" My objections about just being back to work, my hunting equipment being in storage, and not having the right clothes were pushed aside by Marcus. He said that I wouldn't have much time off for the next couple of months, so I should take advantage of this lull before the storm. Marcus went out to his Cadillac, brought in his shotgun and some shells, and solved that problem. He told me all I needed was some jeans and boots, and I was all set. "I guess I don't have a choice here, Kelly," I said. "If you don't mind, I'd like to go with you guys." The next morning, very early, Kelly came to my mom's place to pick me up for the 2-hour drive to their ranch. Jeff decided not to go, so it was just us. "That okay with you, Daniel?" Kelly asked. I nodded, and off we went. The drive was pleasant, and we learned a lot about each other. No prying or deep discussions, just talking among new friends. We had a good time that day, at least, I did. I developed a respect for Kelly. She did everything with a grace and ease that I found fascinating. I found myself watching her instead of hunting for quail. Kelly got her limit of quail, and I only got 2, but I had a great time. On the drive back to town, she and I talked mostly about the upcoming wedding and Marcus. Kelly liked him almost as much as I did. Though the wedding was the main topic, we did learn several things about each other and found that we had a lot in common. She was an outdoor type of girl who liked to hunt, fish, camp, and ride horses. I enjoyed the same things. She dropped me off at my mom's place, and as I got my gear out of the truck, she said, "It was fun, Daniel. Let's do it again soon." Kelly honked the horn twice and drove off to the meeting with the preacher. I hit the ground running, and for the next 4 weeks, I learned much more about the oil business than I had ever done before. By the time Marcus got married, I thought I could handle the day-to-day operations, as long as an emergency didn't come up. Marcus told me that his future bride had told him that he could phone and talk business for an hour a day, but not on the weekends. It was a big concession from Sophia, but she understood that he had to keep up on what was going on during my training period. Kelly and I would do something together at least on the weekends. We would go fishing or hunting or take all-day horse rides on the Volmer Ranch. Sometimes, Kelly would meet me after I closed the office, and we would have dinner. I was beginning to think that being a hermit, as far as women were concerned, might not be the best course of action to follow. We talked about a lot of things on our drives to and from the ranch and our nights at dinner. I told Kelly about my busted marriage and the reasons. She told me about her ex-boyfriend in Austin. Kelly wasn't really broken up over the guy. They had only been going together for 6 months or so, but she really was pissed off that the maggot cheated on her with her best friend. We both had baggage, I guess, but mine was a bit heavier. I think the wedding day came and I had never seen Marcus so nervous. A man who could negotiate multi-million-dollar oil leases was literally shaking in his crocodile skin boots. I gave him a shot of Jack Daniels to calm him down while we waited in the church vestibule until we took our places at the front of the church. Sophia was stunning in an ivory-colored dress. It wasn't a wedding dress, but it was very formal. Kelly was her maid of honor and came down the aisle before the bride. She was wearing another formal-type dress, but in a deep blue. The color brought out her auburn hair and blue eyes. I know that the bride is supposed to be the most beautiful one on her wedding day, but in my mind, Sophia had stiff competition in the beauty department from Kelly. Jeff walked his mother down the aisle. The reception was at the ranch, of all places. Maybe now the place would hold happier memories for me. A large contingent of oil rig workers was there by invitation, including my old friends Victor and Sean. I had a chance to catch up with them and some of the other roughnecks I had worked with. Kelly, as the maid of honor, and I, as best man, were sort of thrown together all night. There were pictures, seating at the bride and groom's table, and traditional dances. I don't really think we had to be forced to spend time together. In fact, you couldn't have separated us with a crowbar. We spent the evening enjoying each other's company because we wanted to. Needless to say, a good time was had by all who attended. The first week of the honeymoon, I called Marcus at least every other day to understand how to handle some unexpected items that came up. By the time the 3rd week came around, he had to call me to find out what was going on. I had grown into the job and was doing well at it. The newlyweds decided to extend their trip for another 2 weeks because the business was in good hands. I was glad when they came home and I could go back to my old job and get rid of the responsibilities of being the boss of Harrison Energy. While the new couple was gone, Kelly and I continued to meet a couple of nights a week for dinner and have our little adventures on the weekends. Once the new couple returned, we saw no reason to stop spending time together. In fact, I had more time now that Marcus returned, and we increased our dates both in number and in activities. By this time, Kelly and I were more than just good buddies spending time together. We were in love with each other and had started to talk about us. I had come to the conclusion that I couldn't wallow in self-pity or cut myself off from people anymore. Maybe I would be hurt again, but I decided I couldn't go through life being afraid of loving someone or having someone love me. Kelly, in this case. I knew that she could hurt me, but I thought it was worth the gamble. Every time I would start a hint or talk about moving our relationship up a notch, Kelly would smoothly change the subject or get me to talk about something else. Now, I know it's usually the women who want a clarification on a relationship, but considering my history, I wanted to know if I was setting myself up to be hurt again. Mainly, I wanted Kelly and me to be us instead of just Kelly and me. A hell of a turnaround for me, don't you know? One Friday night after dinner, Kelly suggested that we go dancing. We had been to a couple of neighborhood bars and danced a few times, but she wanted to go to a big dance hall. She wanted to go to the ranch. I wasn't thrilled with her choice, as it still held some bad memories for me, but I thought maybe it's just another step I need to take to get rid of the baggage in my life. We got to the honky-tonk, and it wasn't too busy. It was only about 8 p.m., it would start to fill up around 10. Kelly and I had just come back to our table after dancing when up jumped that same damn devil that had screwed up my life before. Remember him? I had pulled out Kelly's chair and she sat down when I heard, "Hello, Sean, it's good to see you." It was Lyla, with her flavor of the night or week, or whatever. Another urban cowboy. Seeing Lyla brought back all the anger and hurt from so long ago, feelings I thought I had put behind me. She was still very pretty but had a hard look about her. If she was a horse, I would have said she had been rode hard and put away wet. Lyla stood there, waiting for me to say something to her. "Well, hello, Lyla," I said without enthusiasm. "I haven't seen you in, about a year and a half or so. How have you been?" Lyla looked at Kelly like she was a rattlesnake under a bush. "Aren't you going to introduce us?" That was the last thing I wanted to do, but I was sort of stuck with a dry well. "Kelly, this is Lyla, my ex-wife." "Lyla, this is Kelly, I hesitated, unsure how to introduce her. "Hi, I'm Kelly Vollmer, Daniel's fiancé." "Nice to meet you," Kelly said, and saved me from any further awkwardness. There was a challenge in her voice, and Lyla was a little shocked by the word fiancé. To be honest, so was I, but I tried not to show it. Good old Lyla wouldn't let the challenge go unanswered. "Give me a call, Sean, and we can get together to talk about old times. Any reason two old friends can't have lunch or something?" I was steaming. First, I was angry at myself because of the feelings that seeing Lyla had stirred up. Then I was angry at Lyla for trying to put Kelly down by telling me to call her and the way she looked at Kelly. All in all, I was about as pissed off as I had ever been. "No, I won't be calling you, Lyla. We have nothing to talk about at lunch or anywhere else. We're not friends, and I don't want anything to do with you. I told you when we split up to go to hell. I'm in that same place now, and I haven't changed my mind. Go to hell and leave me alone." I took Kelly's hand and started to lead her out to my truck. Shouldn't have done what I did then. It was petty and below me, but I couldn't resist. "Come on, Kelly, let's go. Something stinks around here," I said. Lyla's cowboy was younger than me by 4 or 5 years and shorter. He was huskier than me, and I guess that gave him courage. He puffed himself up to challenge me. "We don't talk to our women folk like that where I come from," he said in a phony Arizona accent. "Then go back to wherever the hell y'all come from, boy," I answered. I think my anger had overridden my good sense, and I wanted to hit something. Kelly stepped in between us and told the young man, "Buddy, you're about to make a bad career move here. It would be best for all of us to walk away." Lyla grabbed the guy's arm and pulled him toward the dance floor, saying, "Come on, Bobby Joe. He'll kill you if you fight with him. I've seen him hurt men before. He's a brute." As we walked to the truck, I was muttering to myself. I opened the door for Kelly, jumped behind the wheel, and drove away, still muttering to myself. When we got to her place, she turned to me and silently asked for an explanation. I think she was a little upset, her eyes bore into me like a laser. I'm really disappointed in myself, Kelly, I said. That all the old anger and hurt came back when I saw Lyla and I thought I had put all that behind me. I should have handled it differently, but I didn't. And I'm sorry for that. She nodded as I talked and said she understood. Then, she asked, what about this fiancé thing you said to Lyla? That really surprised me. I thought Lyla was trying to put a spur into you, and I thought I would give her back some of her own medicine. Make no mistake, she didn't have to come by our table. She did it on purpose. She wanted to torture you a little. I thought introducing myself as your fiancé would set her back a step or two. Kelly smiled at me proudly, and I felt a bit of weight lift off my shoulders. One good thing about seeing Lyla tonight, I continued, it showed me that I have no leftover feelings for her, other than the anger I showed tonight. Now that's gone too. She hasn't aged all that well, I guess. Her party lifestyle is catching up to her. She looks hard. Kelly raised an eyebrow and asked, what leftover feelings did you think you had for her, Daniel? Her stare wouldn't allow me not to answer truthfully. I guess I missed her and thought maybe I still loved her a little, in spite of what she did. Now, I know that isn't so. I missed being part of a family, you know, a wife and maybe kids someday. That's what I missed, not Lyla. Kelly's eyes softened as she listened, and she leaned over and kissed me. You've got me now, Daniel. And you'll never have to worry about me doing what Lyla did. I promise. I smiled at her, relieved and more in love with her than ever. Well, I'm free now, Kelly. I love you, and I know that all my ghosts are gone. Will you marry me? I asked, finally finding the courage to ask the question that had been on my mind for so long. Are you sure that's what you want? She asked, though her eyes sparkled with hope. Yeah, I'm sure. The only reason I haven't asked before is that you seemed to shut me down when I got close to asking you before. Please, will you marry me? I asked again, more urgently this time. Her smile widened as she said, yes, Daniel, I'll marry you. I was just waiting for you to ask. The hugs and kisses exchanged in the front seat of my truck that night answered that question for me. Kelly and I have been engaged for a year now, and the wedding is in 2 weeks. The long engagement was to make sure that all my demons were killed. They have been. Marcus is going to have to run the business without me for about a month because Kelly and I plan to take a long honeymoon. We are going to the Grand Canyon and hike down to Phantom Ranch. It will be my second visit, but a new adventure for Kelly. After that, we're going to Laughlin to spend a few days with my friend Ron. He's promised us the VIP treatment. When we leave Laughlin, Kelly and I are going on a cattle drive in Colorado. We'll help move a herd of cattle from the high country pastures back down to the ranch in the lower valley. If we have time, I will take Kelly to see the Atlantic Ocean. None of these are very romantic, but the romance will be in being together. We need to take the time while we can, because when we come back, I have a new job. I'll be the big boss at Harrison Energy. Marcus is going to retire when we get back, and he has made me a full partner. He says a man will always work harder for himself than for someone else. Sophia says it's just an excuse to do something nice for Kelly and me. Plus, it keeps it in the family. I'll say it one more time, it's really good to have friends. Thank you for watching this gripping tale of determination and change. What would you have done if you were in Adam's shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below and don't forget to like and subscribe for more inspiring stories.